and I'll show you some pictures here. I started with this aluminum foil tape. This is tape that my husband found at Home Depot in the air conditioning section. It's 3 inches wide, so I just cut off a section, and I wanted to see how embossing tool would work on this. I've done this before, but I haven't done it using Make the Cut, so I thought I'd show you several different flowers that I used an embossing tool on. This is one design. It's hard to see, but that corresponds with this design here. This one is flower 2, which corresponds with the second one that I'll show you. The third one, flower 3, corresponds with this. And this was the foil that I put on my mat. Now this could be done with any cutter, and you would have to experiment with your embossing tool or engraving tool and with your cutter to determine which pressure you would use to get the effect that you want. I found that because this foil is so very thin, it makes a difference of how close the lines are. This was very close, and if I got the pressure too high, it would tear. And so I had to open up the spacing, and I'll show you that, to make it work better here, because I had it on the least pressure I could put it, and I still got a lot of wrinkling and tearing. And a little better result with changing the spacing of my lines that form the engraving. So I just wanted to show you those pictures before I show you how we do this quickly and easy in Make the Cut. So if I go to the outline screen, you'll see that everything in black is a line. This is the original image that I started with. It only has the cut lines. I got this from the Pazzles software and just imported it as a WPC and brought it in to Make the Cut. It was one of the images that came with the software. It also comes with Funtime, various versions of it. So I took this flower and hid this outside layer by just, I'll find it here, and I'll just hide it by clicking on the eye icon. You can see now that all I have left is the inside shapes, the circle and these little design shapes here. And once I hid those, then I use the duplicate feature in Make the Cut to create each of these different lines. So if I hover over them, you can see the red represents all the fill lines. So whether you want to do this with a pen or an engraving tool or an embossing tool, doesn't matter. You can use this technique for filling in fonts or filling in shapes of any kind. So we'll go back to this fill outline here. And what I'm going to do with the outside edges of the flower hidden is I'm going to select these pieces here and go to the Edit menu and come down to Duplicate, and I want to select Nested Duplicate. I'm going to use a gap of -0.01 or 0.015 or 0.02, depending on the effect that I want. So right now I've got it set to 24 counts. That means it's going to repeat these lines that I've selected 24 times with a minus gap. That means it's going to fill inside rather than outside. With scale by width, and I'll click on the preview so you can see, well, it just kind of puts a lot of lines in there. So I'm going to accept that and see what it looks like. Now to get a better view of it, I'll click away from it and maybe even do a join so you can see the effect. All of this in red are lines that were joined, so it looks very much like this one up here, except that the center is not all the way filled. What I found I had to do in order to fill the center with lines right along with the outside was to select the center separately. If I use undo, Control Z, I should get back to where I was. I would hide the center while I'm outlining this here. Do my duplicate, nested, and preview, accept, join all those. And then I can select just a center and do the same thing. Edit, duplicate, nested duplicate. This time maybe take it up to about 36 and preview it. And you see that it's got a smaller circle there, but I can keep going until that circle gets filled a little bit more. And as far as I want. So you can kind of adjust the lines the way you want them to be. If I select just those and join them, then you get an idea of what this looks like. So if I zoom in real close on this, type 4 and 3, you'll see all the lines are there. And this is what either your pen would draw, or your engraving tool, or your embossing tool would draw to get the effect. Now, I really like the effect, whether it be drawn or whether it be embossed in the metal. It's very nice. Doesn't even need to be engraved. So the different effects you get by setting the distance. This one, since it was so intense, I found that I could back off to a 0.02. So I can go to Control Z and undo, and we'll just undo all of this again. Should have just made a duplicate of this flower, but here we go. Move that to the bottom. And we'll try it again just with a little different setting here. Any questions so far?
There was just one that asking about what the name of the, or what the tape was called. So I was just answering that.
It's called
go ahead.
aluminum foil tape. It was generic for Home Depot, so I'm not exactly, it's an imported from China, but no other really distinguishing marks. Foil, aluminum foil tape. I might have to grab it and make sure, maybe after I'm done with this, I'll get the roll and read to you what's on the label or type it in. So if I want to do a, make a different kind of design or change the design, I'd still do nested duplicate, but this time I'll go to minus 0.02 and go back down to 24 or so. Let's start at 19 and preview it. So when I do a gap of minus 0.02, you see that I'm starting to get this kind of effect with a kind of a little circle. As I add more lines, I even get more line. Almost reminds me of a sheriff's star. And then you can change it until it looks the way you would like it to look. So that's at 24, maybe 23. I like that. So you can, again, accept it and join to get a clear view of what it's going to look like. So that's with a 0.02. On this one, I think I did a 0.15. So we'll do that. I'll just select these. And I really like that nested option for doing fills, engraved fills or pen fills or embossed fills. So we go to Edit, Duplicate, Nested, and I'll just make this a 1.5 minus 0.015. Preview. And you can see how the design changes there. If we lower this number, we can get more of an open effect, like this one is. And join, so you can see the effect there. I think I left this one still on a 0.02 with a lower number to get that effect. So that's all I really had on this one. Again, I'll show you the pictures.
Yeah. Now, before you leave that, the question came in: what kind of pens do you use on the metal tape or tool?
I did not use a pen. I used an embossing tool. In this particular instance, I used a Cricut embossing tool, but you can use any one that you have. You can, if your cutter will handle a hand embossing tool, you can just, like the Zing, you can just put that embossing tool right in the machine, as well as Gazelle will handle just a hand tool. The Pazzles has an engraving tool which works nice, and they also have an embossing tool that works nice in their machines. And it's pretty open as to what you can use. An engraving tool has a really fine point, and it will give you probably even very fine detail. And it just depends on your machine. And I would recommend just very light, as light pressure as you can get, because this is backed by paper. And the foil has an adhesive on it, so it's just really, really thin. And when you pull it off, you know, to put it right where you want it to be. Otherwise, I leave it on the backing until I'm ready to put it somewhere. This is the backing here. So I just peeled away the excess and left the flower right on the backing, just to remind me of the different ways that this can look. So any other questions?
I don't see any.
I had exported this to use it on other cutters not supported by Make the Cut. I can select all and go to File, Export, Selection to SVG, and just save it as an SVG file. Then I can import it into any of the software that will use SVG files. So I have a number of cutters that Make the Cut cuts to, but I have a number of cutters that Make the Cut doesn't cut to directly. So I would just select these, export as SVG, and import that file into the software for that cutter. And I resize this, if need be, to about 3 inches, 2 3/4 inches, I think, so it'll fit on the 3-inch wide tape. Right now they're wider than that. Okay, so if no other questions on that one, I'll go to the next.
One other question came in is, what do you use for backing?
The backing, the tape comes with a backing. So I use its own backing, the foil tape backing. And while it's on the machine, on the mat, I put the foil and its backing on the mat. and then do the embossing directly on the foil, then I can lift up the backing, the entire backing off of the mat and preserve the integrity of that very thin foil.
So because the foil is so thin, you don't really need any, like when you do cardstock or other embossing, sometimes you use like a latex or rubber pad behind it.
Oh, no,
but this
no
is so
pad.
thin that you don't need it. Yeah, okay.
No, I didn't use any kind of pad. I do have mats for embossing, which if I were going to do embossing on a machine, the Gazelle embossing mat's very, very nice, and Pazzles has a nice embossing mat. You really need those if you're going to emboss cardstock, because otherwise you won't even see the impression on, and you use maximum, almost maximum pressure and maybe several passes if you're going to try to emboss cardstock at all. For embossing, really, I leave that for lighter weight, either metallics or lightweight paper, lightweight vellum, so that I can see the results. You get a nice result with high pressure on some of the machines that have that, but if you have the embossing mat underneath, you don't need quite as much pressure, and you'll get a nicer emboss effect. It still won't compare to the embossing on a pressure roller system like the Fuse or the Big Shot or Cuttlebug, any of those. It's a different kind of embossing. But this is line embossing, so each line would be visible.